Our top story on the show: amidst growing mistrust within the Five Eyes intelligence alliance, US Intel Chief Tulsi Gabbard held wide-ranging talks with her Indian counterpart, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, in New Delhi. The first high-level visit to India by a top official of the Donald Trump administration. Tulsi Gabbard also met Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and discussed key aspects of defence cooperation and intel sharing. Sources reveal that India also raised concerns over growing anti-India elements within the US and demanded strong action against Sikhs for Justice group. This comes after NSA also chaired a high-profile meeting of top global intelligence czars, including those from the Five Eyes network, focusing on boosting cooperation in confronting various security challenges, particularly related to terrorism and threats posed by emerging technologies. My colleague Nikunj, Garg, Senior Managing Editor with the NDTV channel, joins me to decode India's intel diplomacy in greater detail. Nikunj, thanks so much for joining in. Let me start by asking you that for India, this is very significant, especially for our core concerns pertaining to cross-border terrorism.
Well, yes, absolutely, Gaurie. We have to keep in mind that Sikhs for Justice is a forum that has now spread its tentacles not only in United States, but its original base of Canada and adjoining areas. And remember that people who have for long been saying that the Sikh Khalistani radical terrorism is all but dead, we have to keep in mind that SFJ, working in cahoots with the inter-services intelligence of Pakistan, has been actually actively responsible for carrying out physical violence, not only in the state of Punjab, but outside the borders of Punjab as well. Now, in the meeting today, apart from the fact that India raised the demand of a quid pro quo, remember, SFJ is a banned organization under UAPA by the Ministry of Home Affairs, but on a quid pro quo basis, India said that SFJ must be banned, but that's not the highlight of the meeting. The highlight of the meeting is that India very unequivocally raised the issue of threat being faced by India's diplomatic personnel, including our ambassador there and our diplomatic complexes. Remember, in the last meeting when Prime Minister Narendra Modi traveled to United States, we have decided to raise the strength of our consulates in the United States, taking the total number up to 8. That increases the number of places, diplomatic complexes that India has, which will obviously be on the radar of SSJ. And also the issue of constant threat, which India said that, is actually halting, somehow stalling the diplomatic activities that these diplomatic personnel are supposed to take under the Geneva Convention. So apart from the ban, the issue of physical harm and physical threat that the SFJ has been issuing to our diplomatic personnel was very forcefully raised. India minced no words in saying that SFJ is just an offshoot of Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate of Pakistan, operating out of Canadian and the American soil, and it must be seen as so. And unless we are able to distinguish state-sponsored terror from some kind of genuine protest movement, the real action against the state-sponsored terror or terror activities cannot be taken. So India, raised the issue of ban, B, most forcefully raised the issue of physical threat on our diplomats operating out of American and the Canadian soil, and issue of our diplomatic complexes security. And additionally, what we have been wanting to make clear, we have done it very forcefully, and that is that SFJ must be seen as an offshoot of Pakistan's ISI, completely funded, promoted, backed, propagated by Pakistan's ISI.
All right, Nikunj, thanks so much for decoding that in that great detail and putting things in perspective. Viewers, that really is the focus of India Global, which is the intel diplomacy that we are undertaking with the US, with several other countries as well. Remember, 3 out of the 5 Five Eyes countries did attend the conference with India's National Security Advisor. And the questions we ask is that will India and US now begin intel sharing in greater detail as distrust grows within the Five Eyes network? Remember, Canada and US have also been facing tensions, and that is impacting the Five Eyes network. The second question, Will Trump address concerns over growing anti-India elements? You just heard Nikunj talking about it in great detail, about the Sikhs for Justice group, the fact that the Indian representatives are being attacked, the fact that this needs to be seen as an offshoot of Pakistan's ISI. Will all of that be now addressed? And could Five Eyes also grow to include the global south? That really is the other aspect. Let's get in Glenn Carle, who's a former Deputy National Intelligence Officer for transnational threats, joining us on the broadcast. Glenn, now what happened today, yesterday and today is extremely significant for India. The fact that we want to spruce up our intel mechanism and apparatus, the fact that we want to work more closely with the US on several of these concerns. How do you see this now progressing, particularly towards two of India's core concerns, which is cross-border terrorism and ensuring that those who are anti-India elements are not sheltered anymore on foreign soil?
I think the subject of the Khalistani operatives in the ISI is a relatively easy, likely win, we could call it, for India in its intelligence relationship with the United States, because Donald Trump fundamentally, of course, will never say this explicitly, but is hostile to Islamic movements and states. And no one has ever trusted, no one trusts any intelligence service and shouldn't. But in particular, the ISI has played a double game, as India has always argued and pointed out. So on this one, the U.S. doesn't care really, or certainly the Trump administration, about Khalistani issues particularly, and it would be a good way or simple way for the Trump administration to have closer relationships, and there will be some sort of a quid pro quo by coming closer to India's positions on what to do about Khalistan. I think this is a likely direction.
Right. And where do you see this now, this intel diplomacy, if I may call it, of New Delhi, going forward from here? You know, do you see India being part of the Five Eyes network, or do you see this more being addressed at a bilateral level? How do you see this now being progressing from here on?
Well, I think the Five Eyes is in trouble, and that's because Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, and the Trump administration in general have shockingly disturbing associations and affinities with Russia, frankly. And so the other four members of the Five Eyes, other than the United States, I'm certain, are deliberating about how much intelligence they can continue to share without risking the sources, the lives, the methods, and the national interests of themselves. So Five Eyes is troubled right now. It is an offshoot of World War II, as people probably don't know because it's such a long time ago. And four of the five were either Great Britain itself or its Commonwealth dependencies. Actually, it's technically still colonies at that time, and the United States, the one wayward colony from long ago. So there's a cultural, historical, and linguistic fundamental component to the Five Eyes. So I find it hard to imagine, really, that the Five Eyes would expand to include India or France, say, but that there be, and already are, extensive and deep intelligence relationships. Certainly. Will something new emerge? That's conceivable. I think it's unlikely.
So
I
the
think
point
this is a pretty transactional administration.
Yes, the point is that this is an Anglo-Saxon framework which has pretty much outlived its utility in its present form, simply because the crimes that it is and the threats that it's facing are also now in different forms, whether it is cyber, whether it is, you know, such formats. They don't follow what the Five Eyes network of Anglo-Saxon framework is. So what about some of these new age threats that are coming in? How do you see that being tackled? Primarily, I'm focusing from India's point of view.
Oh, well, I know from my own experience, and logically one would expect, that India and the United States have a rich intelligence relationship. It hasn't been intimate. It's become progressively so year by year for the past 25 years, roughly. So it's certainly more than conceivable that India and the United States bilaterally, and perhaps through the Quad, although Trump has questionable feelings about the Quad and relationships, alliances in general. But it's certainly likely that India and the U.S. will have continued and probably deepening intelligence relationships on areas of mutual interest, which would be terrorism, which is largely Islamic-inspired terrorism. That's certain. New Five Eyes equivalents in the 21st century, that's possible. At least we can say with confidence there will be increasing intelligence sharing and collaboration bilaterally.
All right, let's leave it there, Glenn. Thanks much for speaking to me on India Global.